Tashidelek and welcome to Tibet This Week, where we bring you weekly news updates on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's have a look at today's headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama embarks on first journey of the year, heads to Bylakuppe Tibetan settlement. Systematic erasure of Tibetan language raises alarm as military presence intensifies at Lungar Buddhist Academy. Central Tibetan Administration mourns the passing of former Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and former US President Jimmy Carter. Sikyong congratulates leaders of Japan's Parliamentary Support Group. Sikyong condemns China's sanctions on Canada-Tibet Committee as transnational repression. Education Department launches 3-day leadership conference for Tibetan school heads. Estonian delegation visits Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile. Office of Tibet hosts Sino-Tibetan New Year gathering in New York. After nearly 4 months of rest at his residence in Dharamshala, His Holiness the Dalai Lama embarked on his first journey of the new year. Tibetans and local residents lined the streets from his home to Kotwali Bazaar, bidding him farewell and seeking his blessings. His Holiness departed around 9:30 a.m. this morning for Delhi. He is scheduled to arrive at the Bylakuppe Tibetan settlement, one of the largest Tibetan communities in exile, for an extended stay on January 5. The Tibetan language faces escalating threats of removal from educational systems under systematic policies by the Chinese government. Recent social media reports suggest Tibetan may be excluded or made optional in upcoming college entrance exams, alarming Tibetan students, educators, and artists who see the language as central to their cultural identity. Since 2021, numerous Tibetan language schools have been forcibly shut down, including award-winning institutions and monastery-based schools, as part of a broader push for cultural assimilation. The PRC government's recent white paper emphasizes national unity, sidelining ethnic identity and traditional Tibetan practices. Policies mandating Chinese medium instruction across most subjects and the expansion of boarding schools have intensified efforts to replace Tibetan with Chinese. These measures disrupt Tibetan children's connection to their culture, sparking resistance through protests, yet authorities continue to suppress dissent. The forced shift away from Tibetan language educational endangers traditional knowledge such as Tibetan medicine and astrology, while creating a generation of Tibetan youth unable to speak their native tongue. Observers warn this cultural erasure represents a deliberate effort to weaken Tibetan identity. In another big concern from Tibet, China has deployed approximately 400 military personnel to Larung Buddhist Academy in Sedar, Tibet, alongside helicopter surveillance signaling heightened monitoring of the world's largest Tibetan Buddhist studies center. Starting in 2025, new regulations will cap residency at 15 years, mandate monk and nun registration, and reduce the number of practitioners, with Chinese students reportedly being asked to leave. This follows years of systematic crackdowns, including mass evictions and demolitions in 2001 and 2016 to 2017, halving the academy's population of its peak of 10,000. The measures are part of China's broader campaign to control religious practice and restrict Tibetan Buddhist institutions. On Monday this week, the Central Tibetan Administration held a prayer service to honor the lives and legacies of former Indian Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, who passed away on December 26, and former US President Jimmy Carter, who passed away on December 29 last year. Both leaders were remembered for their unwavering support for Tibet and their contributions to global peace, human rights and justice. During the service, officiating Sikyong Thalamdoma highlighted the profound impact of their leadership and their steadfast commitment to the Tibetan cause. Condolences were extended to families of both leaders with gratitude for their legacies of compassion and advocacy. In a condolence letter, officiating Sikyong Thalamdoma described Dr. Singh's legacy as a beacon of harmony and coexistence, adding that his kindness toward Tibetans will always be remembered with profound gratitude. Speaker of Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile Khyentse Tempel expressed profound sadness, lauding former US President Jimmy Carter's legacy as a champion of democracy and human dignity. In his condolence message, Speaker Khyentse Tempel emphasized that Carter's compassionate spirit and dedication to peace will continue to inspire generations. The Tibetan people joined in mourning his loss, offering prayers for his soul's peace. Both leaders leave behind enduring legacies of compassion, justice, and a commitment to a more equitable world. Sikyong Tsering, on behalf of the Central Tibetan Administration and the Tibetan people, extended congratulations to Honorable Eriko Yamatani and Hiroshi Yamada for their appointments as chairperson and general secretary, respectively, of the Japan Parliamentary Support Group for Tibet. In his message, Sikyong praised Yamatani's courageous advocacy for Tibetan rights and her bold leadership against authoritarianism, expressing optimism for her role in advancing Tibet's cause and ensuring the success of the upcoming World Parliamentary Convention on Tibet in June 2025. Similarly, Sikyong commended Yamada's consistent parliamentary support for Tibet, noting his dedication as a source of inspiration during critical times. He highlighted Yamada's pivotal role in rallying global advocacy for justice, freedom, and human rights for Tibet. Both leaders were lauded for their steadfast commitment to the Tibetan struggle, with Sikyong reaffirming his intent to work closely with them and the support group to further shared goals. On Tuesday this week, Sikyong Tsering condemned China's sanctions on the Canada-Tibet Committee through his official X account, describing the move as a blatant and troubling escalation of transnational repression. He highlighted that such measures aim to silence Tibetan voices in free societies and reflect a broader pattern of intimidation targeting fundamental freedoms and democratic values beyond China's borders. Sikyong emphasized that these coercive actions against Tibetan advocacy group threaten universal principles of justice and freedom, echoing the teachings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He expressed hope that these sanctions would only strengthen the Canada-Tibet Committee's commitment to defending human rights and truth. The Canada-Tibet Committee is a prominent organization advocating for Tibetan rights, remains a vital voice in the international community, and the sanctions have drawn widespread criticism from human rights defenders. On Tuesday this week, the Department of Education of the Central Tibetan Administration inaugurated a 3-day school leadership conference at the College for Higher Tibetan Studies in Sara. The conference, funded by Global Affairs Canada, aims to enhance leadership skills among Tibetan school principals and head teachers from Tibetan Children's Village, Sambodha Tibetan School Society, Sambodha Tibetan Missouri in India and Nepal. Education Kalun Thalamdoma, who presided over the opening ceremony, emphasized the vital role of strong leadership in shaping Tibetan schools' academic and cultural success. She urged school leaders to take greater responsibility for guiding teachers and students and ensuring positive outcomes. Kalu also highlighted the need for more specialized professions among Tibetan youth. The conference themed Leading Learning on Day 1 will continue with sessions on leading culture and conclude with strengthening school leadership on the final day. On 27 December, a delegation from Estonia led by Roy Strider, the coordinator of the Tibet Support Group in the Estonian Parliament, visited the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, meeting with Speaker Khenpo Sonam Tempel and the Deputy Speaker Thomas Ringtekang. The delegation delivered a letter from Estonian Speaker Lauri Hussar and gifts from MP Juku Kallred and the Estonian Parliament, reaffirming Estonia's support for Tibet. A similar letter was also presented to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Speaker Khenpo Sonam Tempel reflected on the enduring friendship between Tibet and Estonia, emphasizing their shared commitment to preserving Tibet's cultural heritage. He encouraged Estonia to consider initiatives for His Holiness the Dalai Lama's 90th birthday, designated as the Year of Compassion. Deputy Speaker Thomas Ringtekang highlighted China's oppressive policies in Tibet, particularly the forced Sinicization of Tibetan children through colonial-style boarding schools. She expressed gratitude for Estonia's unwavering support, asserting that such solidarity counters China's portrayal of Tibet as isolated. The visit underscored the strong bonds between Tibet and Estonia in the global effort to advocate for justice and preserve Tibetan identity. The Office of Tibet in Washington, D.C. hosted a Sino-Tibetan New Year gathering in New York, fostering dialogue and unity between Tibetans and Chinese attendees, including democracy advocates, intellectuals, and youth. The event, supported by local Tibetan organizations, highlighted His Holiness the Dalai Lama's vision of non-violence and the middle way approach. Chultim Gyaltso, Chinese liaison officer of the Office of Tibet, emphasized continued outreach to the Chinese community and paid tribute to the late historian Li Jiangling for her contributions to understanding Tibet's history. The gathering saw cultural performances by students of New York Wisdom Garden Tibetan Weekend School, which showcased efforts to preserve Tibetan language and culture in exile. Prominent Chinese figures, including Hu Ping and Tao Fangshaw, praised His Holiness' promotion of peace and the importance of Sino-Tibetan dialogue, urging further collaboration. That is all the news for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. Thank you so much for watching.